At our town committee meetings, too.
Yes, he does. I'd like to call the Board of Finance's budget workshop for March 7th, 2013 to order. Just to recap, this is one of potentially two budget workshops that the Board of Finance schedules every year after having received public input after the presentation of the budget this past Tuesday. We typically have two. We always schedule two sessions. We don't always use two sessions to deliberate, to make some, ask some further questions of the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen if necessary, to state our opinions. But as is traditional with all Board of Finance meetings, we open the meetings up to public forum, both at the outset of the meeting and the close of the meeting. So, with that, is there anyone who wishes to address the board on the budgets that we have been presented by both the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen? Hearing none. What I'd like to do is see if there are questions or that any of the board members have at this point, specific questions that were not asked or perhaps not answered on Tuesday last or during any of our budget deliberations. And again, I'm sure Mr. Gammerman may have covered this a bit on Tuesday, but just for those in the viewing audience, this is far from the first time we've seen these numbers, and we've had substantive discussions over the past, I believe it started in December, with the Board of Education, Board of Selectmen. We've held subcommittee meetings. Board members have attended budget workshops with that the town department heads present when they present to the Board of Selectmen, and we've had several iterations of this work in progress to get it to this point. So I guess it's fair game. Anybody have questions? And we don't necessarily have to restrict it to either one or the other. We can just freeform it. Anybody got anything? Jonathan? Kimberly?
No, I don't have a question. The only thing, we were actually having a discussion earlier, and I just wanted to clarify something that is confusing every year, and it's the difference between the spending increase and the potential mill rate increase. There was just an article in the Guilford Courier today that kind of sparked the discussion. The way it was phrased, it was a little confusing. The overall spending increase for both the town and the Board of Ed combined is 2.6%. The proposed mill rate increase at 0.7 mils is a 3.12% tax increase. But when people are kind of dissecting the budget, they have to take into effect that there's a decrease in revenue, which is causing the tax rate to be higher than the spending increase. So I think every year that confuses people, whether they're different because revenue is up or revenue is down, but there's always a difference in the spending increase and the mill rate increase.
Right. Kimberly, you make a very good point, and bringing those accounting skills to bear here, I appreciate you pointing that out. And maybe we haven't talked enough about where the losses have come from on the revenue side, so that's probably a pretty good opportunity. There are a couple of substantive areas where we have diminished non-taxation revenues. The first and largest of those would be school construction grants of $176,593 last year. We've known for 10, 12 years that we'd eventually lose funding from the State Board of Education because of the change in the methodology that they use to reimburse communities for the building of schools. At one point, what they would do would be to commit to a funding level, and then they would fund that over a period of time, as opposed to the methodology they employ today, where the 31 or 33% support that we're going to get for the state for the new high school is given to us all up front, so we don't have to bond that amount. So that's the primary reason why there's been a diminishing scale. This isn't the first year. We've seen a diminishing scale for many years, but this year it dropped off completely. So that's $176,000. And we also have a forecasted drop of about $43,000 in other local revenues Sheila, which are the largest of those at this point?
The local revenues actually are pretty consistent. We actually had an increase in 2 departments at least, in building department and in town clerk. I think building was 5,000 and town clerk is 1,500.
Is that the reclassification of the transportation?
I think we should.
Right, the recycling is
Yeah,
one
that's
area
looking
where
at.
it's actually, you see a decrease on the general fund side, but that's netted out
On the
with the
expenses.
expenditures on the expenditure fund side, yes.
But people will see, the reason I'm bringing that up is people will see that, well, it was on the budget document the other day, it'll be published in the newspaper as well. There will be a decrease on that side. And we're also forecasting a drop in delinquent taxes and interest, which is a good thing, 'cause that means that we're collecting taxes as we should be, at about $26,000 there. In total, we're about $250,000. We have $250,000 less of non-tax revenue this year. So to Kimberly's point, despite the fact that the 2 budgets come in at 2.6%, the amount of money needed to be raised to fund the budgets is actually a 3.2%, a 3.12% increase. So, Kimberly, thank you. Anybody else?
I have a comment on that subject.
Sure.
Isn't it also noteworthy that our grand list has grown only very slightly this year?
Yeah.
As opposed to a little bit more typical, larger increase in previous years?
Jonathan, that's a good point. I think the grand list growth was about a half of 1%, was that?
0.12%.
And that generated how much additional revenue for the town?
$24,000 net.
$24,000, no, net,
Yeah,
yeah.
application.
I have a couple of observations, more than questions as well. Some of why I think, at least for myself, I'll speak for myself, that I have relatively few questions tonight. I had an opportunity to ask some questions Tuesday, but as both the first selectman pointed out and the superintendent of schools and the chair of the Board of Ed, there has been an enormous amount of communication as these budgets have been developed this year and frankly over the past few years. So I feel fairly well informed as to what was coming. There's very few surprises, and in some particular areas, there's smoothing out of the bumps that you might otherwise see in some budgets. I think in particular, credit to the selectmen and the departments in Town Hall for creating this 5-year capital plan on a rolling basis. It creates much more predictability for potentially expensive and volatile portion of the budget, which has been, of concern in the past. So that's very helpful. There's also a concerted effort to increase allocation in the general fund for capital, which will create even more predictability and the ability to plan not from year to year, but over many years. And I think that's generally a good thing, and it makes it easier for us in terms of reviewing the budget to see what's coming down. We've benefited from a couple of years now improving healthcare performance, both on the school side and on the town side. So that's made a potentially volatile portion of the budget, at least for a couple of years now, more predictable and easier to understand and see as we move forward. There's been increases in the fund balance, which is obviously beneficial for all the reasons explained by Mr. Mazza at the last presentation. It's helpful in terms of the rating agencies, and it's an area that had been of some concern and is trending clearly in the right direction. Contracts have been negotiated now, we've been in a difficult fiscal environment for at least 4 years. Those numbers are falling into line, and they're more predictable, and they're not, we're not dealing with residual numbers that are causing problems. So on balance, there's been a lot of work over many years to make, in some ways, our job not easy, but easier. With all that said, again, speaking for myself, but I don't think it's too much of a reach, that we're cognizant of the pressure that everyone is under in the community, and that it's important to make sure there's no unnecessary or wasteful spending. And everyone, we've repeatedly asked, and from both the town and the school, and we've had every opportunity to review these budgets, and I think that there's a concerted universal effort to make sure that things are falling into place very well. The Board of Ed, if I can comment a bit on them, they're under a lot of pressure to produce many different and varied additional programs. I think they're carefully weighing what is necessary. This year there was, I know because I attended many of their workshops, there's a lot of pressure from the community to move toward all-day kindergarten, which I'm sure is coming. But in addition to the space requirements and the additional staffing requirements, there's other pressures in the school budget, and not least of which was trying to create more capacity on in-house special ed, which over time will save money on that side of the budget. So I mean, I think there's, again, consensus that, at least I feel it, that the priorities are, there's good focus on keeping the priorities straight, and while tending to the needs of the citizenry, trying to keep the budgets functioning as they should. So
I would agree. I'm going to take a minute here too. I think Chairman Bloss and Dr. Freeman had summed it up well. This is not, at least from the Board of Education side, and I think the same holds for the town side of the budget. This is not a hold in place or a stagnant type of approach to budgeting this year. We've been doing that for the last 3 to 4 years, where we've been cutting personnel, significant cuts in personnel on both sides. We haven't necessarily been investing in things that we need to invest in over time. We've let some things go. On the town side, there's additional money in public works this year for road work. There's additional capital. We're on that committed path to get us back to a point where we are appropriately funding our capital line item. On the pension, which is the most significant portion of the increase on the town budget, and in fairness to the Board of Selectmen, I've a couple of times said we need to point out what the operating budget increase is. All right, and yes, it is higher than the overall town budget, but it's higher because it's absorbing $722,000 of additional contribution to the pension. To do what? To fix a problem we know we have, not necessarily today, but one that we're going to have many years from now if we don't address it and take care of it today. So on the town side, I applaud the effort to bring us back to a path where we were going until the markets did what they did to all of us in 2008. On the Board of Education side, and I think Lou mentioned a few of those, again, what we're seeing is reinvestment. This is a perfect time to do it. Salary increases are at around the 2% level, all right? This is the time to invest in the programmatic improvements that we've heard. The special education needs, bringing in resources to make sure we meet the Common Core state standards, and the literacy coaches. So I think this year, what I saw this budget being was a continuation in many areas of holding the line on spending in other in areas, but key investments in critical areas of the budget. So that's been my observation right from the start. Dave?
Yeah, Matt, I just have a few very brief comments, and basically they're pretty much of an anecdotal nature. And this is something I passed along to our town committee members the other night. I work with an individual who is, well, first of all, I'm the public defender for one of the judicial districts in Connecticut, and the presiding criminal judge that we have now in our district in Milford lives in a neighboring town, served on 2 different school boards over the course of his career before he went on the bench. And from time to time, we talk about business here in Guilford. And, I guess it was about 3 weeks ago, we were discussing the various school districts throughout this area. And he maintained that Guilford has the best school system in the state. All right, now this is coming, from an individual who is experienced in this area, has served on 2 school boards in 2 different towns. So I'm just passing that on. I think the Board of Education, Dr. Freeman, have just done, a wonderful job over the last several years. And as I say, that's the reputation that you people have established. And I think it's, it's a remarkable achievement.
Anybody else? Jonathan?
I actually feel pretty positive about a lot of the aspects of this budget. They're very close in line with the annual inflation rate. They're very close in line with the 5-year inflation rate. They're a distinct and marked improvement from last year. And when it comes to direction, I really think the town is in a very positive direction in terms of both budgets being not only a lower mill rate increase from last year, but even lower than the previous year. So I do feel very positive about these budgets. I do have my concerns. I like to look out long range, and I'm always weary of this kind of wave of debt that's coming to finance the high school. It's a great thing. It's a great investment for generations to come, but we do have to pay for it. And I do think we need to keep our eye on capital spending as we approach that debt bubble that's coming, or that debt wave that's coming, and just be disciplined about what capital projects we choose and which ones are urgent. We do have the opportunity to keep our ratio in a low debt ratio as opposed to a moderate debt ratio. This could save a lot of money in financing costs going forward. I am also a little bit concerned about revenue. I think we would all like the economy to turn around and see our grand list growing, and maybe even a little bit of economic development here at Guilford that's new. But I am weary about revenue, and I think we may need to look at some of our special fund revenue and maybe decide if some of that is funded well enough, and if some of that surplus money might go towards some expenses in the current operating budget.
Well, I felt compelled to, prepare, statements, but I'm feeling like I'm just going to start hacking them. I did want to bring up a couple things, and it's partly probably to address some of the things we've heard, and I don't want to be repetitive, so that's why I've been sitting here. I've been striking my comments. But I know I got a little bit passionate the other night for those that were here. And so I just wanted to go over a couple things. First, the amount of work that goes into this every year, I'm always impressed by it. Thanks to all the elected officials and department heads and administrators and staff that crafted the budgets. I usually, for this workshop, I go back through all my notes and kind of develop a justification on whether to send this on or not. And I went through a bunch of data, and I'm not even going to mention it because I think it's a very responsible budget and should move forward to referendum. I did want to address a little bit the town revenue challenges that were discussed a little bit before, as well as personal revenue challenges. We know that there's still challenges, and I think there's not an elected official in Guilford that doesn't think that we rely too much on property tax. I started mentioning the other evening, maybe a little bit too passionately, about my role or position that I had at my firm. I do want to mention that I'm in a design construction industry position. I became a principal of the firm in 2008 when the bottom dropped out. And, we reduced staff in 50%, we reduced salaries, we went 4-day weeks, we did a number of different things. I do realize that there's Guilford residents that continue to struggle. And I have to tell you, over the last couple of years, most notably this year, I have heard not nearly the level of protest on the scale of Guilford anyway about lack of salary increases, unemployment, underemployment, any of those. But coming from someone who's in an industry that got hit probably as hard or hardest by a recession, like the one we just had, we bounced back. And I think a lot of people are starting to do that, and our firm's moving forward. And I wanted to mention that because that's what we heard several times. We just heard it again from this board, that it's a forward-moving budget. It's not a status quo budget. We're able to reallocate, reinvest, maintain, improve, a lot of the services that are valued by our residents, and it ranges from senior citizens to the children of the community. I look at this always as a value budget. I don't look at necessarily the bottom line, the price tag, or the dollar amount. I look at the value. And when we start making cuts, yeah, we can make cuts. I make cuts. Everyone makes cuts when they need to, and they have to prioritize. But ultimately, what do you do when you start making cuts in government or in a community like this? And I started listing things, and we've heard it. Joe, I think, mentioned it. Equipment breaking down during the snowstorms. I mean, can we live with that? Can the residents live with that? The library, something like that kind of a resource, working on limited hours. Youth and family services being cut when we probably need those services more than any other time. So I kind of look at it that way, but there was one comment that I didn't want to let go, and it's really to my colleagues and of all the elected officials. And Jonathan may recall that last year, I actually brought out the archives of last year, there was some communication about email communication about the communicating of this budget. And I actually spoke with several people before and after the budget vote. And I am going to read from my prepared statement here because I think it'll keep me on focus and I can end. I think that many will inevitably vote this budget down, whether it's because they feel it should be a 0% tax increase due to continued personal income issues or the lack of certain increases in certain line items. Or maybe it's not high enough. I've heard and seen that people think it should be higher because they want more in capital, mitigate bonding costs, or include full-day kindergarten. Voters will also vote in favor of this budget because whether it's based on principle or their pocket, they're going to believe that this is a fair and value-added budget. And I think we all hope that voters will truly become informed and understand what is included before coming out. But forgetting my tirade from Tuesday night a little bit about the lack of public attendance and participation at the public hearing, I think we need to get the word out more effectively about this vote now and in the future. Last year, with the conversations I did have, many people did not feel that we made reasonable efforts, besides the fact that we put a banner on the green and legal notices to inform residents. And in today's world, this is despite my making the plea that, well, we have GCTV, which is right there, at least 3 newspapers, both hard copy and online, the town website, social media like Facebook, and the Guilford Public School Message Service. We have to look at methods to reach voters who work the long hours, don't work in Guilford, and who may not have the access to the time to utilize these resources. And then they get wrapped up in their daily lives. And if I was not on this board, I might actually fall into that category. I work 45 minutes away, I work long hours, and sometimes I don't have the time with 3 kids. I actually read the paper, but maybe I wouldn't if I wasn't this invested in the community. And so we should mitigate any perception we have to any Guilford taxpayer that the budget process and the vote is a secret, and I had heard that. Now, it may be too late, but I do think we should look into informational technology such as the Guilford Public Schools uses. It's very effective. I get sometimes inundated with the public school messages, and I welcome that. I want to hear from different sources, whether it's a text, whether it's an email, or whether it's a phone call. We should also look at making sure the voting signs are out as soon as logistically and, of course, legally possible. And I wanted to add this last one, which was even an old school way that I heard from my mother, who used to work at Park and Rec for many years. She said the town staff used to receive a list of people to call to remind them to vote. Not how to vote, but to remind them to vote, because we do get wrapped up in our lives. And I think that any method to get more than 17% of the voters out that we got last year would definitely be an improvement. So as a final statement, I'm all in favor of this budget as presented.
That was the original point.
I could have just said that probably and ended it, and Lou could have gotten on his way to his trip. So,
Mike, it's amazing. We've struggled with the same question and same comment since Joe and I started doing this stuff far too many years ago. And we've had some discussions. What do? Do we send postcards out to every house? the old traditional direct mail reminder kind of thing. Because there are, people are not going to necessarily opt in with their email addresses or their Facebook stuff, because there will be plenty of folks who figure we'll use that for purposes other than what it is really intended to be used for. The difficulty I have, Mike, and not quibble with it, is that this is a participatory democracy. Yes, we have some responsibility to inform the public. Have we done a good enough job? I'd say that if there's anybody who's interested in finding out what we're doing, they have opportunity. They do. Years ago, I had gone so far as to make a rather ridiculous proposition that if someone missed 2 budget referendums in a row in voting, that they would lose the right to vote for 2 years.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. A Democrat saying something like that? Disenfranchising people? Come on.
Oh, boy.
But that's a level of frustration that I think we've all been at. It is the people's responsibility to engage. It is also our responsibility to make sure they have access to the information. And you know what? What does a postcard cost these days? 30 cents? 30 cents on bulk mail postage? 10,000 properties in town?
Right.
Do we put that in the budget? Just as the, but then, when do we put it in? Do we put it in January so that they can participate in some of the Board of Ed workshops, some of the town workshops? Do we wait until 2 weeks before the vote when they've missed the opportunity to come when the budgets are presented? Maybe it's something that we send out in January that lists all of those things. Here's your opportunity to participate. I would definitely entertain doing something along those lines, because I still think that's about the only way we're going to blanket the entire community, is to mail to every property, every taxpayer in town.
Chairman, I'm all for any idea that would increase public turnout, but I don't think I can support you on the denying the vote to the... I didn't think you were serious. But I did want to make one point. A lot of people have told me that their lives are busy, and that when they elect us, they put their faith in us to just put forth their views and what they believe is right. So we all have that obligation on our shoulders.
I appreciate the sentiment. I've actually joked in the past, similar to the way I joked about the disenfranchising of voting, is I've actually said, maybe they do trust us.
God forbid.
Maybe they do trust us.
Man, I would just make one other point along these lines, and I know everybody on this panel is going to agree with me on this, but that question is a stable question whenever we have, the pre-election debates from the League of Women Voters, okay? Right. I mean, it's the first one that how do we increase, community participation, throughout the decision-making process, getting them out to vote, but it's a perennial question. I think 10, 20 years from now, okay, people are still going to be asking that very, very same question. And I don't know what the answer is. Certainly it varies tremendously, in presidential years, it really, there's an enormous difference. But, on an issue seemingly as mundane as a budget referendum, my guess is that whatever our turnout is, what do we normally average in the way of a turnout?
19, 20%.
Yeah, 19, 20%. It's probably not much different.
17 last.
Yeah. It's probably not much different than any of the neighboring towns.
And I'm just going to say, I think I brought it up for the sole point of keeping us cognizant as elected officials that even if it's not in a formal sense, just trying to get people out and, all of us doing our part to do that. And if there's a more formal way or something that we could do, great, we should just keep it in mind. But I know, I did say, it could be too late for this budget season, and I'm going to be pretty positive that it is. But maybe next year we make sure that, we're thinking about it a little bit more in advance. So that's all.
I have an observation about the communication goes both ways, and I try to pay attention. The first section I pull when I get the paper is go to see the letters, what are people saying, And are there complaints, comments, suggestions about how we're doing things, how the Selectman's office is doing things, and, what the schools are doing? And I find that specifics are so much more helpful than generalities, okay? There's a lot of communication to the effect that a zero budget increase would be helpful, and as a general principle, that's useful to hear once or twice. But for the most part, I think we're looking to make the most bang for the buck here. And that, as the only objective, isn't a useful objective. I think if people have questions, there's any number of people that are involved in the town on, an elected basis or in appointed commissions, and there's plenty of staff, and there's any number of ways to get. So if people have questions and they don't feel that they understand some aspect of what's going on, they feel overwhelmed, questions are just as good as comments. And, so it would be helpful for people to question why we have this many of this type of employee, or why this particular person is doing that particular job that way. So if there's a sense that there's any particular problems, that's a way for everybody to participate in a way that could produce useful input. I can tell you, every time I see a letter or have a question from somebody, I try to dig underneath and find out what the answer is, and if there's some, basis for the question, and if there's a legitimate answer.
It's an interesting point you raised, that, we should let people ask questions in writing. It can be fairly intimidating to be here on GCTV and to get up at the podium, and sometimes they don't even have the advantage that we have, where we've got information about the background of the budget to ask a more detailed question. So maybe we should consider entertaining the possibility that they could just write in, and we'll answer questions at our meetings.
That's a policy, though.
Yeah.
Well, no, we don't necessarily entertain questions. We entertain public comment.
I'm just talking to.
For the budget hearing. For the
Well,
budget
also,
hearing
well,
itself.
yeah, and also during the course of the year, too, man. I mean, if a letter comes in
Yeah, we
to
address
address
it.
to you, it's
It's
addressed.
addressed. Yeah.
And the point is, it prompts our
Right.
gears to get in,
Right.
motion. Maybe they have a point, maybe they don't, in which case we can help the communication go, or maybe, maybe there's some aspect of something that needs to be shared, so.
Yeah, I think the point
There's
that
no bad question is the point.
Certainly easier than coming out in, this terrible weather coming to our
Yeah, I think, Jonathan's onto something, but I do think, Matt, that if we get an email, you get an email, I get an email, I mean, we
bring it up under
respond to
court,
it,
and
if we don't know the answer, we get the answer probably within 24 to 48 hours.
Right. And we bring it up under correspondence.
And we bring it up under correspondence in addition to that at the regular meetings.
But, maybe it needs to be more formal than that people don't have, don't necessarily go to you or to me, but goes to a general mailbox or something along those lines. We can take that offline and see if that works. Kimberly, you're the only one I didn't give an opportunity to comment on the budget. I apologize.
No, I would repeat a lot of the same things that have been said. Firstly, being that, as you mentioned at the very start of this meeting, this is our third or fourth time seeing this budget. So I don't want people to think that we haven't asked questions, had discussions, and dug into it. We've seen this a lot of times, and, like I said, all those questions have been asked, the discussions have been had, so the lack of questions shouldn't be a negative to our discussion tonight. And the other key point, which I agree fully with, is the last 3 or 4 years, our budget has been just trying to get by. We've had to make cuts. We've had to lay off staff on both the Board of Ed side and the town side. And this is really the first time in a number of years where we're adding things. But as you've said, they've added them very creatively. We've taken advantage of a decrease in debt repayment to be able to fully fund our pension plan for the first time in a number of years. The Board of Ed is looking at an in-house autism program to ultimately save taxpayer dollars down the road, hopefully. So it's not increases just for the sake of increases. They're forward-looking. They're to work on our debt repay or our pension repayment. It's to save money for special ed down the road. I can't say enough about what they have done. As Lou said, there's a lot of people that wanted all-day kindergarten in here. It's coming. Is it next year? Is it the year after? I don't know, but it's coming. As you said, the letters to the editor, that was one of the key things. There's a lot of letters in there about wanting full-day kindergarten. It's coming. This just isn't the year. We've got the Common Core state standards we have to deal with, and we have to deal with other things. Maybe that's next on the agenda. And again, on the town side, the capital, ever since I've been on this board, we've been talking about old dump trucks. And we're finally making headway. I know we have a lot more to go, but we've gotten some newer trucks in town, and we've got plans to get some more. So I'm very encouraged.
Yep.
Tee it up.
Tee it up? All right. Why don't we start with the operating budget? Tee it up and hit it out? Sure. All right. Okay. The board has been presented with operating budget request from the Board of Education in the amount of $54,491,186, and the town's budget, operating budget, capital budget, debt service amounts to $30,878,098, and is for a total operating budget of $85,369,284. Is there a motion to move that to the vote, to referendum?
So move.
Is there a second? There's a lot of seconds.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one question. Shouldn't we call the question of each budget separately?
We can, if that would be your prerogative. We typically approve a
That
total
would
number because
seem
it
logical,
goes
no, to approve each budget individually?
6 and 1/2 dozen the other. It's a one-town budget that we vote on, but go ahead. Sure.
You are, I hope I'm correct in saying this, but you are sending to the voters one budget.
One budget.
And they don't vote on it separately, so I think your motion has to be for the total budget.
Right.
Whereas the capital is a separate
That's correct.
line item.
Okay,
That's my opinion.
understood.
Thank you. So we have a motion and multiple seconds. Let the record reflect. Is there any further discussion on the operating budget? Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions?
I'm in
It's
favor.
unanimous. Thank you. Well, we now need to address capital projects. Both the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education have put together packages. Let's address the town side. And what we need to recall with the town side, that this is a 2-year bonding program, not a 1-year bonding program. This is all part of the 5-year capital projects plan that is in place. And this is the years 3 and 4, I believe, of the original 5-year capital bonded plan. Now, we still have a 5-year plan because it's now 7 years or whatever it is in the process. But for the immediate 2-year period, the Board of Selectmen is asking for approximately, I believe it's $5,991,000, but for 3 specific programs. Road reconstruction and road elevations, $2,500,000. Town property improvements and equipment acquisitions, $2,411,000. Emergency services upgrades and acquisitions, $1,080,000. Is there a motion to approve moving them to referendum subsequent to the development of the bond questions, which we will need to approve before it goes to referendum?
I make that motion.
Second.
Any comments, questions?
The only thing, I just wanted to clarify your statement one step further. When you mentioned it was a 2-year budget, that I just wanted to remind folks that we did not have a bonding question last year. So we had one 2 years ago, which covered last year and this year. We had no bonding last year. And so now this is another 2 years, so we'll have this question this year, and hopefully, unless there's some catastrophic change, we won't have one for 2 years. But I just wanted to remind folks, we did not have a question last year.
Good point. Anything further, Mike?
I think it's worth mentioning that you said they were coming out of 3 different areas. There's actually 4, but this particular year, there's nothing coming out of Public Works.
Correct.
As far as equipment. However, a lot of that has been shifted, well, I shouldn't say a lot of it has been shifted, but the road reconstruction, which is incredibly vital to this town and a lot of the residents in the town, that's where a lot of the money is being put in.
This year.
This year,
These 2 years.
for this 2-year bond question.
Right. And further to the point of the value of the 5-year plan, so those, that reprioritizing doesn't get lost, it's just in a sequence, in a different sequence from where we were, and it's, we're going to get to the other projects, it's not like we're not going to get to them, and it's just smoothing out the bumps.
It is.
Okay, just
Certainly.
one more thing. Just a reminder to folks that we're approving one gross number, but every project that is going to go to bonding goes through the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Financing before it is decided on.
Correct.
So this isn't carte blanche to spend this amount of money.
Right. This is a continuation of the 5-year program that we put in place, so. John?
Just a couple of brief comments. I feel that the capital budgeting is just really on track, and it's a monumental improvement from what I've been told it's been like before. We're replacing equipment at the end of its useful life as we're supposed to. But again, I do remain concerned that when it comes to projects, we need to be careful about what's important and what's nice to have, considering that we want to remain in that coveted low debt ratio to enjoy the very nice bond interest rates that we do enjoy.
Call the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? It's unanimous. Okay. Now, on the town side, excuse me. Where's I have that right here. Oh, there it is.
Stuck on the school side, you see?
Yeah, school side. Now we're on to the school side. Make sure I have the right one. 1, 6, 2, 3, 6, 7, 7. That's it. The Guilford Board of Education has recommended a series of bonded projects. I believe it's 9 of them in total, amounting to $1,623,677. Is there a motion?
Moved. So moved.
And a second?
Second.
The largest of these programs is the replacement of windows and doors at Cox. It's being classified as envelope-type work, and that's almost $1 million of that 1.6. So I think that's worth noting. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Well, there's also an attendant, efficiency savings associated with that. The single pane glass, it's basically the windows that were there for the past 40 years, I think, or longer. So there'll be, it's not just an aesthetic project or there's actual savings down the line by doing this, just an energy efficiency.
Good.
Matt, the other thing I would note is that included in that package, there's a $250,000 package involving security updates throughout the system. So it's, should be noted.
I'm glad you pointed that out in the wake of recent events. Jonathan?
I think, from what I understand, this particular bonding request is only a $27 increase from the last bonding request. Is that correct? I was looking through my old records, and it appeared to be only a $27 increase.
Okay.
So I thought we might have to have some side hearings about the increase. No, I'm just kidding. But I did want to ask a little bit about the wiring upgrades. And I don't know if anyone can really speak to it, but I just wanted to know what some of the benefits were. I think we're going to go from Cat 5 wiring to Cat 6.
Yeah.
At a cost of, I don't know, roughly $100,000 or so for both schools.
Can you come?
Come on up. Yeah.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Well,
John, I spoke with Kevin Mitchell, today regarding that very question about the wiring upgrades, and he explained to me that the upgrade is necessary due to the Wi-Fi installations at, I believe, Adams and one other school. And it's to increase not only the effectiveness of the Wi-Fi throughout the building, but also increasing the bandwidth within the schools, for that. So there's a specific purpose for that Cat 6 wiring. He also stated to me, and I think I have this right, that the Cat 5 wiring in the schools are approximately 15 years old. So, in order to upgrade the Wi-Fi capabilities and to increase the bandwidth for those using that wiring is necessary.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jason, right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Any other questions?
No.
Again, not really a question, but a comment. In looking at it, for so many years, we were looking at roof projects. It is refreshing to not see roof projects. I don't believe there was a roof project on last bonding either. Of course, they will come back.
They come in bunches, right?
But, yeah.
Hopefully not
Hopefully
anymore.
not.
Yeah.
But I will,
Yeah.
no, I do want to mention, though, that based on the facility subcommittee and the building committee working together, they are trying to spread those out so it's not just all in a 5-year period where it seemed like that was happening. They are very cognizant of trying to spread it out based on the roof life, so.
And just a side note on that, the last few roof projects before we actually ended up coming in considerably under budget on. So even though certain amounts were approved at referendum, all that money was not spent, nor was it bonded.
Correct.
Good point.
Anything else? Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Is there anything else anyone would like to opine on?
Good to go.
Hearing none.
Just
Before,
maybe one closing remark. I just want to remind all our town leaders that while this is an exceptionally good budget, and from a practical standpoint, it's quite an achievement, there are a lot of taxpayers that, in my opinion, that are having a hard time, and there's always more to reach for to run things more efficiently and deliver more to the town, the taxpayer.
in an attempt to encourage voter participation, the annual budget meeting is April 2nd, 2013. It's by charter, the first Tuesday in April, I think it is. And that will be held here. That's a Board of Selectmen sponsored meeting. Where actually the budget can be decreased but not increased at that time. If there are at least 200 voters of 200 of 300. And then the referendum will be April 9th, Tuesday, April 9th. All voting districts are open for the referendum. So, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So,
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Thank you all.
All right. Well done. I know.